Okay, we are finishing off Chapter 7, Part 3 of 3 by talking about crime and different types of crime. I think it's safe to say that we're all somewhat familiar with the definition of crime, which is a violation of criminal law for which some governmental authority applies formal penalties. And within that, you might often hear the term index crimes. So if you're watching the news, you might have your local newscaster giving you statistics on various index crimes in your community or in your region or in your state. And these are the 8 most serious offenses: murder, rape, robbery, assault, burglary, theft, motor vehicle theft, and arson. These statistics actually include crimes reported, but a true statistic is difficult to determine. So, for example, some people might not report crimes because they don't trust the police. Perhaps a victim of a crime is an illegal immigrant, or perhaps they know the person who committed the crime and chose not to report it, which is often common in domestic abuse cases, including rape. So, although index crimes are constantly being compiled at all different levels, nationally, regionally, and locally, it's very difficult to determine the exact figures. Okay, and sociologists additionally classify crimes according to how they're committed and also how society views the crimes. There are 5 different categories, which are victimless, professional, organized, white-collar and technology-based crime, and transnational crime. So we're going to go through each of those. So first you have victimless crimes. This can include anything from excessive drinking, compulsive gambling, illegal drug use. The reason they're considered victimless is because the person who is participating in the crime is choosing to do so. However, many sociologists argue that there's no such thing as a victimless crime. So they'll use examples such as, what if you're the child of an alcoholic? Aren't you a victim? What if your husband or wife is a compulsive gambler and they gamble away your savings? Wouldn't you be a victim? Also, feminists argue that prostitution, although it's considered a victimless crime because both parties are consenting, just reinforces the objectification of women as toys. So while they are called victimless crimes, many people do believe that there's always a victim, regardless of if people are willingly participating in the illegal activity or not. Next, we have professional crime. Some of these will specialize in burglary, pickpocketing, and shoplifting. These people are very skilled, and they often form into their own subculture or criminal circle. They'll do this as a day-to-day job. It's a way to make a living, and they become very good at it. The next category is organized crime. This includes activities including prostitution, gambling, smuggling, stealing illegal drugs, but rather than it just being individuals participating in the crime, it's large organized groups, and these groups dominate that particular world of criminal activity the same way a successful business might dominate the industry that they're in. For example, they'll have a territory, they'll set up prices for a good or a service, and they'll deal with internal and external issues systematically. Also, organized crime infiltrates labor unions. Organized crime might corrupt government officials to have particular legislation passed. They even intimidate witnesses in trials. And additionally, organized crime, is often the only way in which people can move out of poverty. So they feel almost in a sense that this is their only way out. Next, we have white-collar crimes, and this includes activities such as tax evasion, so avoiding paying taxes, stock manipulation, which Martha Stewart a few years back served some time for insider trading, consumer fraud, bribery, embezzlement, and misrepresentation in advertising. And one example of that, the misrepresentation in advertising, would be with Skechers Shape-Ups. They advertised that they had a shoe that would work to tone, and many women went out and bought those shoes, and turns out there was no evidence to support that the shoes actually do what they promised. And so Skechers was required to offer a refund for anybody who did purchase those shoes. Computer crime is often most recently an issue. According to the FBI and the National White Collar Crime Center, over 300,000 internet crimes are reported every single year. Many of us have probably experienced identity theft or some version of it, maybe having a credit card stolen and used. Turns out that 14% of all adults at some point in their lives experience some extent of identity theft. This is, in fact, how several of the 9/11 hijackers were actually able to board planes. They were able to use fraudulent identification. And last, if you look at our friend in the bottom right-hand corner, you might recognize him as Bernie Madoff. He was found guilty of corporate crime, which is any act by corporation that is punishable by the government. And the Madoff investment scandal broke in 2008. Bernie Madoff was the former NASDAQ chairman, and he basically admitted that the wealth management arm of his business was an elaborate Ponzi scheme. So he was sentenced to 10 years in prison, and actually it was his son who alerted federal authorities, and he pled guilty of 11 federal crimes and admitted to operating the largest Ponzi scheme in history. Crime that occurs across multiple national borders are known as transnational crimes. They span the globe. Historically, slavery would be considered the most dreadful example. More common now includes drug trafficking, art trafficking, even endangered species trafficking. And actually the next page will include some of the different types of transnational crimes. So you can take a look at this list. Some of these have already been mentioned, like illegal drug trade. You see some other examples: intellectual property crime, so stealing people's ideas. Sea piracy, so pirates truly exist and they're not like Captain Hook and Captain Jack Sparrow. It truly is a dangerous world out there, especially when you have freight containers carrying billions and billions of dollars worth of product from country to country. The last point I'm going to make today is just discussing international crime rates. In the 80s and 90s, crime rates were more common in the US and Western Europe. Rapes, murders, etc. were reported at much higher rates than elsewhere. Yet the incidence of certain other types of crimes appear to be higher elsewhere. So for example, in England, Italy, Australia, and New Zealand, they have higher rates of car theft. Developing countries have significantly higher rates of homicide. That's due to civil unrest, overthrowing of their parliament and of their government, and civil wars, etc. Worth noting is that homicide rates in countries known to be major suppliers of drugs, such as cocaine, in which those drugs are being exported to countries like here in the United States, have a homicide rate 2 to 5 times higher the rate of the U.S. These are countries where gangs have risen into power, including Mexico, Guatemala, Venezuela, and El Salvador. Okay, that wraps up all of Chapter 7 at-home lecture. Keep in mind that this does replace in-class lecture, but should not replace your own reading and your own studies. So I will see you in class. Have a great day.